All right. Well, hello. Good afternoon from London, and welcome to this Alliance webinar, How to Fund Responsible, Accountable Tech. My name is Elaine Stabler. I'm the magazine editor for Alliance, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. For our audience members who are tuning in with audio only, I'm a white woman with long brown hair and round purple glasses. With COP30 kicking off in Brazil this week, we wanted to turn our attention to a pressing climate issue, the ecological impacts of artificial intelligence. I'm joined by a panel of experts today. Together, we'll be discussing what responsible technology innovation can look like and how philanthropy can have an impact in this area. I'll be introducing each of our panelists and their organisation in just a moment. But first, a few words on housekeeping. We're going to run for approximately 1 hour. There will be a Q&A session in which audience members will have the chance to take part in too. But it's important to note this webinar includes two chat functions. The first looks like a little speech bubble, and you can find it in the bottom right hand of your screen. You can use this chat to introduce yourself if you wish, and you can let us know if you're having any technical or accessibility issues. My colleagues are on hand behind the scenes to help you if you need it. The second chat is called Slido, and it's used for the question and answer part of this webinar. You'll also find it in the bottom right hand of your screen, and you can submit a question to our panelists at any time using Slido. I'll be keeping an eye on this throughout the webinar and selecting questions to put to the panelists during the audience Q&A at the end. When you ask a question, it would be wonderful if you could please tell us who you are and where you're from. We're limited by time, but we'll put as many of them as we can to our panel. And should you wish to activate live closed captioning in English or another language, you can do so via the CC button on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. If you can't see the option here, please look for the three dots button, which should provide you with the option. And if you're having issues with any communication methods, my colleagues are on hand to help, like I said. So please feel free to send a message to the Alliance team via the chat window. And there's an option to make the message private if you wish. Or you can send a quick email to alliance@alliancemagazine.org, and we'll do our best to assist you promptly. And lastly, I'm delighted to let you all know that today we're offering a 20% discount code to anyone who would like to subscribe to Alliance magazine. Alliance is a compendium of news, analysis, and opinion on global philanthropy and social investment. The link will be in the chat shortly if you'd like to take advantage of that. And finally, a recording of today's webinar will be shared with all attendees shortly after this session. So without further ado, welcome to our panelists today. I'm joined by Rafael Zanata from Data Privacy Brazil, Chris Jurgens from Omidyar Network, and Catherine Miller from the European AI and Society Fund. Welcome. It's lovely to have you here with us today. So to kick off, Rafael, I'm going to come to you first. So Data Privacy Brazil has done some really interesting work around climate, land use, and data flow. Can you talk to us about this and also tell us a little bit about Data Privacy Brazil's work in general?
Sure. Thanks, Elaine. Thanks for organizing this conversation. Hello, Chris. Hello, Catherine. Pleasure to be with you. Well, it's a great week to have this conversation. As you know, Brazil started COP30 yesterday, and Lula gave a very powerful speech about reshaping the paths to development and recognizing the roles of communities, of reconstructing forests in Brazil, and also using technology for the common good. So my team is in Belém. Belém now has been transformed the capital of Brazil. But I'm glad to speak on the behalf of the whole team and to share a little bit of what we're doing. Well, I'm the director of one NGO, which is based in São Paulo, which is Data Privacy Brazil. We come from the field of digital rights, but in the past 4 years, we've been working closely with this intersection between the environment and digital rights. I did my PhD also in the Department of Energy and Environment in the University of São Paulo, so I have some close connections with these intersections. And we've been exploring a pathway in which we believe it's impossible to separate those issues because the digital is also physical and demands infrastructure, and it's based on the use of natural resources. Also, our conception of the environment, it's constantly being reshaped, not only based on the resources in the physical world, but also the digital world and the role of information. That's why at Data Privacy Brazil, our biggest fight is to construct this fair informational ecosystem. That's our biggest theory of change. And we are really concerned about all the different dimensions of the processes of datafication of society and what that means for the future of countries such as Brazil. Well, in our area of asymmetries of power and power, we have the projects that they have the clearest intersection between environmental problems and digital rights. I will briefly talk about two projects which are connected to the topic of this conversation. So we've been working together with Instituto Clima e Sociedade, which is a grant maker in Brazil that works on environmental issues, on some databases that we have in Brazil that monitor illegal cattle and also traceability of deforestation. And what happened in the past years in Brazil was that powerful stakeholders, they were using privacy rights to make certain types of information not available to journalists and environmental leaders. So this was a conflict between privacy rights and access to information. And we've been working to position the government in the right direction on balancing those competing values and make sure that the information about the Rural Environmental Registry and also the Animal Transit Node, which is a database for illegal cattle, this is open and considered as a digital public infrastructure that can be accessed by citizens. So we are working to reconstruct the land management system in order to support the government in opening up this information and make it accessible for citizens and journalists. Also, we've been working closely with different ministries and NGOs in Brazil about how to make sure that those emerging projects and databases on deforestation and illegal cattling, they can be used strategically as a digital public infrastructure. So there is a very strong conversation about DPIs in Brazil, also influenced by the role of India and what India has done with the climate stack and other projects. And Lula even spoke about that yesterday. He proposed like a climate PIX, which would be like a digital infrastructure for payments in order to support the reforestation projects in Brazil. So a lot of our work is also inspired by how to defend a rights-based position on digital public infrastructure and to be careful about data protection, privacy rights, and fundamental freedoms when you are setting up those kind of digital public infrastructures. Brazil has been supported by the government of Norway and Denmark and others to invest in those climate DPIs, so to speak. So this is a very strong agenda for the next years. And finally, I would just point to the fact that regarding AI and investments in data centers, we have been defending a very strong position on collective rights to access of information. And this is very influenced by the work that Brazil has done with the Escazú Agreement, which is a regional agreement for access to justice and access to information, in which we defend that projects that provides like tax incentives for data centers or supports data centers in Brazil, they should be balanced by a very clear approach on collective rights to access to information on the use of energy, water, and mineral consumptions on those projects. So collectives themselves, the communities, they should have the power to access information about environmental issues directly with those companies. And this is different from the US approach, because the US approach about environmental impact assessment, it's kind of a technocratic approach, so to speak, in which you have a relationship between the company and the government. And this is different because we're talking about a collective right to access to information that the collectives and the communities themselves would possess in the legal relationship with the company. So we defend that for the AI bill in Brazil, and I can explore later what that means because it's a long conversation, but thanks.
Thank you for the introduction, Raphael. It sounds fascinating, and I definitely want to get into that a little bit more. But before we do, I have a follow-up question for you. So Data Privacy Brazil is a grantee of the Ford Foundation. So I want to know, how has Ford been supporting your work in responsible technology and advocacy? What do you think other funders can learn from this approach?
Yeah, so Ford Foundation has been really instrumental in supporting our Global South Alliance that we set up 3 years ago. It's an alliance of 26 NGOs in the Global South, and we are participating in international conversations such as the Global Digital Compact, or the emerging AI panel within the UN system. And we defend that because global South societies and communities, they have been exploring those projects on digital IDs and DPIs for a very long time. They have a lot of experience and concrete knowledge to be shared and to have an active voice. So what we defend is that we should not be included as a quota, but we do have the knowledge and the scientific knowledge and expertise to guide those conversations at the international level. And Ford Foundation has been really supportive of that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to move on to you now, Chris. Last year, Omidyar Network launched a new strategy focused ensuring that, quote, our shared humanity steers our digital future. And you've also written a charter titled Our Vision for a Responsible Tech Future. Can you tell us about how this guides your work as a funder? Chris, we can't hear you. I don't know if that's just me. Oh, I think you're back. Yeah, can hear you now. Oh, no. I think it's just delayed. If you give it a second.
All right, how about now?
Yep, you're with us. Great, thank you.
Sorry about that, but great to be with you. I'm Chris Jurgens from Omidyar Network, calling in from Washington, D.C. Today. Many of you may know us, Omidyar Network, as one of the philanthropies of Pierre and Pam Omidyar. Pierre was the founder of eBay. In our early years, we were known as a pioneer in impact investing, then shifted to a strategy focused on more upstream systems change levers and the demands of reimagining capitalism, responsible tech, and belonging. And then last year, as you referenced, Elaine, we made a big strategic pivot to focus on the future of digital technology as 100% core to our mission and purpose. This was in light of the profound impacts of generative AI hitting everything, everywhere, all at once, and a reflection of where we thought we could make the most impact as a philanthropy with our particular history, positioning, toolkit, and people. And so our mission today is to ensure that tech and AI in particular serves our shared humanity. I think we start from the core diagnosis and point of view that digital tech can be a powerful source of good and make amazing and wondrous things possible. But it's also been a driver and accelerator of many of the harms today we're seeing across society, democracy, and economy. And this all comes back to how we govern and steer technology as society. That to date, we've too often let digital tech play out in an unregulated free market with very few guardrails, move fast, break things, that sort of Silicon Valley ethos, and see how it plays out. And while the scale up of these technologies have had positive impacts in many places, the way we've scaled it has led to massive harms that could have been averted in the case of how social media has played out, the concentrated power of the major tech platforms today, and the lack of accountability mechanisms associated with it. And so we fundamentally think there's a lot to learn from past technological revolutions. Like digital tech isn't that radically different from technologies we've had over the past century. We started with cars a century ago and pretty soon decided we needed stoplights to guide the traffic and car insurance to address liability and seatbelts and airbags for passenger safety and catalytic converters and now EVs to reduce environmental harms. We have very robust frameworks in pharmaceuticals and medical devices and nuclear energy that say we need innovation, but we want to channel it within these very well curated guardrails that ensure that the technologies that produced are safe and good for society. And we're 50 years into the tech revolution, and we have very few such guardrails at a societal level we can port to on digital tech, other than a few areas that cross really bright ethical red lines. We've not established a strong enough consensus on what we want digital tech to do for society and what we don't want it to do. Nor have we put in place the various forms of government, which can be policy, but can also be norms and standards and stakeholder expectations that steer tech in the way we want it to go. So that's kind of our core point of view. And then the thrust of our strategy is focused on two pillars. The first is ensuring that more people have agency to take control of their own digital future and shape the future of tech and tech policy. Too often, AI in particular's position is too technical, too complex for citizens, consumers, or even elected representatives in government to take on. So just leave it to the experts in Silicon Valley and stay out of the way. That's absolutely not true. Digital tech is so ingrained into every aspect of our lives. And people know what's working and what's not working in that. And so the more people and communities across society, not just the experts, feel that they have agency to shape the way tech impacts their lives, the more likely they are to enshrine some collective choices into laws, safeguards, norms that guide tech. So a big part of our work in this expanding agency pillar is building a bigger tent of stakeholders who have voice and agency in shaping tech and tech policy. Certainly working with the core civil society organizations focused on responsible tech and tech accountability, but also working with labor unions and worker groups on how AI is impacting their jobs and industries, with parents, groups, and youth on around implications for kids and their safety. Bringing more voices from communities too left out from elite-driven conversations out of Silicon Valley or DC. So engaging BIPOC communities, faith communities, rural communities, older Americans, working with creatives who both have outsized power in shaping culture and narrative, but also face profound threats from AI. And the goal is to move from a narrow coalition of civil society that's focused on the future of tech to a very broad and diverse coalition that can shape narratives, inform worldviews, shape policy change. So that's the agency about piece of it, building the big tent. The second pillar of our strategy is strengthening societal governance of techs through policies, rules, norms, and standards. So obviously a big focus of that is policy advocacy. We're a US-based philanthropy. We're focused most heavily in the US, but these days are not only looking at the federal level, but very heavily at the state level in states like California, where there is opportunity to set rules, and working in areas of tech policy where there is opportunity for bipartisan agreement, even in these polarized times, which you see in areas like impact on kids and AI companions and these sorts of domains. Another form of governance we're focused on is corporate governance. So working with both corporate boards and institutional investors to ensure that companies have strong AI governance in place to manage risks, assess their most material impacts, and ensure that they're governing AI in a responsible way. We want to build out the same kind of governance infrastructure for AI that the climate community has built out over the past 15 years, where every company now of any size now has a climate plan, climate commitments, transparency around climate. We need that same sort of governance frameworks for all companies, not just the tech companies, on how they're using AI and how it impacts. And then another form of kind of governance and accountability is the media ecosystem. So a lot of work to help engage reporters, work with media outlets, and shape narratives in this space. So underneath these frames of agency and governance, there's lots we could get into in specific strategies we're doing in levers, from lobbying to worker organizing to shareholder activism to impact investments into challenger companies. But that's our big picture frame, and I'll pause there.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you as well for just using that comparison to climate. We're definitely going to get into that a little bit more in the second part of the webinar. But for now, I wanted to follow up with you. I understand funder partnerships are a big part of your strategy. So how are you working in collaboration with other philanthropies? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Partnership is core to our ethos, and particularly important in this emergent area of AI. First, because it's a relatively less mature field in philanthropy compared to longer standing fields. Second, because look at the just order of magnitude of resources being deployed. Philanthropy as a whole and civil society have only a fraction of the resources of big tech and the AI hyperscalers. So the work is not always oppositional, but where it is a kind of David versus Goliath. And so you need to ensure our Davids are organized and have as strong a slingshot as possible. And third, because AI intersects with so many issues across philanthropy and civil society, So it's vital to have voices connected into the network that are looking at AI's intersection with climate, with democracy, with education, with equity and racial justice, and so on. And so some of the things we're working on are, both more traditional forms of pooled philanthropic funding and strategic alignment, and some more innovative experiments. On the former, last month, we joined with MacArthur Foundation and 10 other philanthropies to launch Humanity AI, which is a funder collaborative that brings together about 10 funders committed to advancing AI that promotes human machine flourishing. Focused on 3 levers: expanding the group of people who make decisions about AI's design, deployment, and governance. Second, strengthening civil society and grassroots organizations that are bringing people together to shape AI's future and have their voices heard. And third, touching on a point Raphael made, supporting the creation of public goods and public data infrastructure that put AI and access and control in the hands of people. So those are the 3 building blocks, and then the work will cut across issue areas including democracy, education, culture, labor and economy, and security. But for us, this was about mobilizing more funders to the table, including those that don't identify primarily as tech funders, but are coming in from education or climate or a national security interest. Aligning funding around shared goals and priorities. There's both pooled funding and aligned funding that funders will do directly. And for us, it's enabled to both have other funders double down in some areas we're focused and cover areas that we don't, but that are critical to the overall future and story. There's another funder partnership that's not launched yet, but will be early next year, that our CEO Mike Kobzanski is leading. And this is about mobilizing an investor voice for a responsible AI future. So looking to bring together a coalition of philanthropies and investors that both invest in responsible AI and those AI companies that are demonstrating the strongest safety guardrails, and investing in things like AI safety infrastructure and things like deepfake detection or red teaming or algorithmic auditing or the seatbelts and catalytic converters from the car analogy for the AI ecosystem. And then it's also about mobilizing a voice from markets in Washington for responsible AI policy and regulation, and making the case that regulation is not antithetical to innovation, but rather that companies will be more successful and profitable in the long term if the ecosystem has appropriate guardrails around it that ensure we're enabling innovation while managing risks. So more to come on that one. But all to say, it's a big problem, and we need to be working together across philanthropy and our grantees.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the very detailed reply as well. We've got so much to get into, but I'm going to come to Catherine. Catherine, thank you for your patience. So my question for you, from the European AI Society Fund, that's where you're from, something your fund has been advocating for recently is more philanthropy in funding issues connected to technology. So can you tell us about that and how it's going?
Of course, thanks for having us. Yeah, the European AI and Society Fund, we're a pooled fund, and we're working to mobilize a powerful public interest community in Europe that can fight for AI that serves people, society, and planet. And similar to this strategy that Chris just outlined, we're doing that through looking at shifting the debate, promoting and enforcing policies that can really redirect AI away from its current trajectory, which has essentially been captured by the interests of big tech, and towards a path where we're using technology to build the kind of fair, inclusive, equitable, sustainable societies that we all want to live in. As you say, a big part of our job as a pooled fund is to mobilize money and to get funders into the space and to move that money quickly, because this is a field where speed is of the essence. Move that money quickly into the hands of the people, the communities, the groups that can make that change happen. And I think, philanthropy has such an incredibly important role to play in this field, because the tech industry is not just vast in itself, and it doesn't just have vast lobbying power, but it's also funding think tanks, it's funding academia, it's funding conferences, it's funding the media. And all of that is kind of stifling space for a public interest vision for AI to emerge. So having philanthropic money, which is independent of corporate and state interests, is absolutely essential for this work to happen. So how's it going? I mean, the good news from our point of view is that we now have 17 funders on board, which is we're really thrilled about, and we're seeing a mix of both tech expert funders and funders coming from social justice, human rights, democracy backgrounds, wanting to enter this space. And we're seeing not only the number of funders entering our partnership grow, but also the amounts that they're contributing. So that's amazing, because it means we're moving 10.5 million euros into the hands of 65 organizations across 23 countries in Europe who are out there doing that important work, holding companies accountable, shifting the legislative debate, putting communities into the heart of that conversation. We've also just heard from Chris, these other partnerships that are emerging. It's great. We've got Humanity AI, we've got Current AI. You know, we're seeing that philanthropy recognizes not just the need to act, but the need to act in coordination and effectively together. And I think the other thing to think about in this space is that there's obviously a journey that funders go on from being aware of AI as an issue and thinking about it to being in a place where they're ready to commit money. And in terms of that pipeline, I think we also see really encouraging signs. So we're having this conversation now. You know, we hold regular briefings for funders to explore areas around the intersection of AI and different issues. So join us on Thursday if you want. We're talking about digital sovereignty in Europe. And we see people coming into those conversations with deep commitment and deep sort of thirst to really get their heads around these issues. So I see that pipeline really growing. So overall, I'm optimistic, but I do think we need to sort of see this in the bigger picture. So I point to 3 other factors that are at play. One is, you know, the tech industry is the biggest lobbyist in Europe. In the past 2 years, they've increased their lobbying spend by 1/3. So just registered lobbying just in Brussels is 150 million euros a year. And that's the tip of the iceberg of what they spend, and vastly more than we have available if you combine all of us together. The second thing I would point to is, like, if you look at philanthropy in the big picture, it can look like there's a lot of philanthropy activity around AI. Some of that is actually just shoring up corporate positions. So it's corporate foundations or direct donations by corporates, or aligned foundations, which are doing things like training policymakers in issues around AI, but essentially pushing the corporate playbook further into the policy machine. And then the third area I would point to is there's a kind of outsized interest in philanthropy in pursuing work around speculative existential risks, as opposed to the real life impacts that we see happening around AI right now. So it's kind of like, what would happen if the robots took over and we all died, rather than what do we do about algorithmic bias? What do we do about pollution from data centers? What do we do about inequity and economic injustice caused by AI? So I think, you know, like I say, I'm hugely optimistic, but I do think, you know, you can live in a little bubble where you're like, yeah, it's all going great. You need to realize that there's a lot of other forces at play. And just my final thing for optimism is what we hear from the field, because the appetite to do this work from across civil society is immense. We launched an open call earlier this year with a budget of 2 million euros to do work on AI accountability. We got 325 applications, which totaled 46 million euros. So in the end, we were only able to fund 15 of those projects. So for funders who want to engage in this space, you know, don't worry that there isn't a field to fund or there isn't work to fund. There is so much work that people are absolutely ready to get up and do the minute that they get some cash in their pockets. So, you know, please don't hold back thinking this is an emergent field, I don't know what to do. we're ready, and these people really, really, really need your help.
Thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate the optimistic note you started on as well. I think we need that, especially when we're talking about accountability and tech, and especially with tech giants. So my follow-up question for you is really about that. Do you think philanthropy has the influence to work with tech giants and influence their actions in a more climate responsible direction, or a more responsible direction in general?
I mean, I think we have to be, clear-eyed about where power lies at the moment in the world. And these companies are enormously powerful, and we need to avoid making mistakes that we made in the past. So when you look at the response to the rise of social media platforms, philanthropy invested quite a lot of time, money, and money in things like supporting fact checkers. And then the minute the political climate changed, the companies ditched it all, right? So I think we need to avoid doing work that, quite frankly, tech companies, if they truly cared about this stuff, have more than enough resource to do by themselves, and doing work that is not embedded in a wider systemic change. So I'm very much of the opinion that at the moment we need to place an awful lot of bets on an awful lot of different levers of change, because we don't know yet what's going to work. But unless we get, we shift that dynamic, so we're putting people and society through democratic institutions in charge of setting the terms for how technology operates in our societies, that we get to say what we want technology to do, rather than having to accept a paradigm that's been set up by people who are acting only in pursuit of profit. I think we need to ensure that any work we do is working towards that systemic change that really has teeth, rather than kind of one-off initiatives which can actually end up serving just as a fig leaf for wider bad behavior by corporates.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for that. I'm going to just take a moment to remind all of our audience members, if you use the Slido chat function to ask your questions for our panelists, you can actually upvote your favorite questions. So if you have a burning question, or if you go into the Slido chat and you see a question that you would really like to hear the answer to, asked by somebody else, you can upvote it and make sure that we ask that question. We will only have limited time for questions at the end, so please do jump in as soon as you can, as soon as you thought of one. But for now, actually, I'm going to come back to Raphael. So I think my question for you, as a grantee, how are funders and grantees working together to pursue responsible technology innovation? That's my question for you, and please feel free to use your own experiences if you have any to share.
I think, well, first of all, the Brazilian community works in a very collective fashion, I would say. So we founded in 2016 this coalition called Rights in the Network, which started with 12 NGOs and now has 60 NGOs. And the way Brazilian civil society operates, usually it's a very cooperative mode, I would say. But there is a lot of difficulties in engaging with computer scientists and folks developing new tech firms in Brazil, using resources from abroad. And also, I think that the conversation about fundamental rights or fundamental rights impact assessments with the venture capital community is really difficult. I'm also part of the Global Network Initiative. I have a seat on the board of civil society, and I usually engage with folks from venture capital firms or others which are on the field of responsible investment community, so to speak. And it's very difficult to find those kind of people in Latin America, or bridging those interests with which kind of projects will be invested in Brazil. And I think we need to have a very serious conversation about certain types of innovation which are harmful, that we clearly reject. For instance, in my opinion, Clearview AI should be banned from the legal system all around the world. The business model itself, considering the way that they, got information from older like Flickr albums or photo logs or any kind of website that had personal data from people, which had a specific purpose limitation in the first place, and the way they just did a transgression of the purpose limitation and they eroded the basic principles of data protection to construct a business model, for me, it makes the business model illicit or illegal by itself. But you don't see a strong position by funders or venture capitalists and others saying we will not support a flow of money to this kind of enterprise. Quite the opposite. You can find those pitches and those companies saying that they are the new thing, and you see the resources escalating really quickly. So I would say that we need to have a stronger theory and conversation of certain types of innovation that we reject. In Brazil, we are defending this principle and this concept of responsible innovation in the AI Act, which I think is an important one. And also, we should not be afraid of the role of regulation in a way. I think regulation can support really nice innovation, as we have in civil aviation, as Chris said, in pharmaceuticals, or even in Brazil with PIX and the fintech revolution occurring in Brazil. Brazil has one of the most advanced regulatory systems for the financial sector in the world. And even so, you have more than 900 fintechs competing and generating those projects such as PIX together with the Brazilian Central Bank. So there is no obstruction between innovation and regulation. But I will point that this is a bridge that we need to work together to reinforce the connection with those investors and those who are building those solutions in the tech sector.
Thank you for that, Raphael. I could see Catherine and Chris both nodding along, so I think you are definitely preaching to the choir with your response. Thank you for that. Chris, I'm going to come to you next. Given where you're coming from, is there a place for philanthropy to influence the actions of tech giants today? Catherine touched on this a little bit, but I would like to hear your response to it.
Yeah, I think Catherine's remarks were spot on, that we have to be very clear-eyed about where power sits in the system today, and particularly the concentrated power of big tech platforms in both the economy and in politics. But also hearkening to Catherine's call for optimism as well, I want to convey that there are opportunities, and we are seeing evidence of philanthropy and civil society and the ecosystem we support achieving some wins and making progress, even in a very difficult climate. And so policy and legislation is very key. This is hard right now because of geopolitical competition across the EU, China, and the US, and also because of regimes in place here in the US. But progress is possible, right? Governor Newsom in California signed a number of bills this year on AI regulation in California, obviously a super critical state, that have meaningful impact, including SB 53 that impose new disclosure, safety, risk management measures on frontier models, instituted things like protections for whistleblowers. And so there's possible through policy channels. Another place we're focusing on are what are the tech issues where you can get broadest bipartisan or broadest coalitional support. And one of those for us in the US context is kids. This has been critical in social media, an area of progress for kids' online safety and protections in the social media context. And we think it's equally important in AI on things like AI companions and protecting kids that are too young from tech that's has many of the same risks posed to them from social media, and potentially worse. And this is an issue that cuts across, because people come at this as parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles, and not through just purely ideological lenses. And we need to find more of those spaces, and we think there are more of those spaces. A lot of salience right now around worker issues, which and worker protections in the context of AI that also cuts across. And then continuing to push for structural change, the kind of forces that have allowed for concentrated political power in the first place. So we've long focused on anti-monopoly in the US. shareholder rights are a way to have some form of accountability through market mechanisms. They're under attack in the US. We need to protect those rights. Stronger worker power is a countervail. And obviously things like pushing back on the proposed US AI moratorium on AI policy at the state level, which would have precluded states from instituting policies. And that was pushed back due to strong advocacy coalition work, including with a number of our partners. Philanthropy, there's a lot of opportunity through policy, through focusing on cross-cutting issues, and by addressing some of the upstream root causes and keeping banging the drum on that piece of the puzzle too.
Great, thank you, Chris. Catherine, I can see that you have your hand up. Would you like to respond to anything that Chris has said?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what Chris was saying, because as you and Raphael as well, because what I'm struck by is how important it is to think about essentially where you are in the world and what you can do from where you are, right? So I'm sitting in Europe, and we happen to be in the place that has the most advanced regulation on AI technologies. So from my point of view, like, it's policy all the way. That's the lever that we have in Europe. Even, you know, in Europe, even when you engage with the companies, they're not, you know, you're not speaking to the bosses, you're speaking to people who are quite far down the food chain, and your ability to shift anything at company level is extremely limited. You know, hearing from Brazil about the way that you're actually able to reimagine technologies in a different way, bring in those perspectives, and I think you know, the policy community in particular has a huge amount to learn from the experience of global South countries and the resistance, particularly community resistance to the building of data centers is a really striking example where there's very, very tangible impacts. And I think thinking, you know, we have a global audience here, and people will be coming in from many different perspectives. And I think it's really important to recognize that the way that you're going to engage in this issue is going to be very strongly influenced by where you are in the world and what your particular focus area is. The important thing about these kind of conversations is that we can join the dots between them and see that essentially we're all working together in the same fight and contributing towards the same mission.
Thank you, Catherine. You are right, and we are very lucky to have a global panel here. So, Raphael, I wanted to invite you to respond here as someone from Brazil. Is there anything that you would like to add based on what Catherine and Chris have shared?
Sure, I have two comments, and I fully agree with what Chris and Catherine said. And also, I would like to point to the fact that this year in Brazil, the field that was possible to construct any kind of broad consensus between left and right was children protection. And we had a very unique opportunity because we have been discussing this bill for the past 3 years. We were discussing this bill, but was because of one influencer that produced a documentary about children exploitation on Instagram accounts that after like 16 million views, all the policymakers and congressmen, they were, you know, into that subject matter, and it was possible to take that as a window of opportunity to approve the bill in 1 month. And it's a quite powerful bill because it really prohibits group profiling and commercial exploitation of metadata and inferential analysis, which is the core business model of those big tech companies. But at least for children, it's a completely ban. So it's a pathway to educate people and adults about how those technologies work. I suppose that in Brazil, like more than 90% of the population does not know how Instagram works and what is the business model behind, or other big tech companies from YouTube, from Google, Meta, etc. So it's important also to educate and to generate civic consciousness in order to have contestation and people saying enough is enough, we do not agree with this. Second is, we've been trying to mobilize peer-to-peer learning from colleagues from India and Bangladesh, Pakistan, Chile, because we see that we have the similar like structural problems, and it's good to have those peer-to-peer learnings among global South activists. It's when we compare with colleagues from Sweden or Norway, it's a very different situation. So for at least for us, we've been trying this approach, and also because of the fact that the investments in data centers and the infrastructure that allows AI to function, not only in the infrastructural level of data centers, but also on the level of which materials must be exploited to construct those devices. It's mostly based on global south countries. And especially one important element is that in order for AI to function, it needs human work, and it needs a lot of data work and data labeling work. And what we are seeing is that those workers are positioned in Kenya, in Argentina, in Brazil. And part of the conversation about AI should be on the dignity of those workers and the liability of the company when it is harming fundamental rights of workers. It seems to me that we have abandoned the conversation about worker safety on the field of AI, and it should be a building block of the conversation. So we should return to the conversation about the chains of production and what is the meaning of dignity of workers.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, all of you, for the conversation so far. It has been incredibly enlightening. We are absolutely blasting through time for this webinar. So I'm going to come to the audience Q&A now. The most popular upvoted question so far is from Juliet, and it's for you, Chris. Just so everyone has an opportunity to answer a question from the audience Q&A, I'm going to ask you all to keep your answers very short, or as short as you can. But Juliet says, I found it hard to find any UK funders who are as focused as the Patrick McGovern Foundation and the Omodia Network on what philanthropy could do in practice. Has Chris found any strong allies in the UK to partner with on humanity AI? And she apologises if this has been missed.
No, thanks, Elaine, and thanks for the question, Juliet. Humanity AI is more US focused. It's a US rooted funder collaborative. Catherine may have more perspective on this from a pan-European perspective. Also referenced Current AI and the work of our Omidyar group colleague, Martin Tisney, who leads Current AI and the AI Collaborative, which is focused on similar objectives in the European context. And so there are multiple Omidyar entities focused on responsible technology. That's one of the intricacies of a living founder who has multiple philanthropic entities. Our lane has been to focus more on the US context with a global overlay, and Martin work and the work of our colleagues at Luminate have stronger roots in the UK. So Juliet, I'd be happy to direct you some of our colleagues, including some London-based folks, for a follow-up. But curious, Catherine, if you have other perspectives.
Actually, I would say, Juliet, that the UK is kind of missing this gap. So if there are UK funders who want to step in, I know many colleagues in civil society would be glad to see it. There is great work by funders from the social justice community, which touches on this. So funders like Joseph Rowntree, for instance, Barrow Cadbury, they're doing some work around this, but there is not the equivalent, I would say, of the kind of, as you say, sort of later-like focus on tech and information system as we see. What we are seeing is sort of in either foundations are operating globally and then in specific European geographies. So for instance, I know we have colleagues here from Mercator Switzerland, also Mercator Germany, both have significant and very, very thoughtful grant-making programs on this specific issue. We're also seeing, very encouragingly, Fondation de France has begun a program on digital technology with its community of hosted foundations as well. So we're seeing at this kind of national level, individual funders recognizing the intersections and how these issues are playing out in the countries where they're based. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have great news on the UK yet.
Keyword is yet, Catherine. Okay, the next question, I think I'll come to Raphael, but Catherine, you may also have some thoughts on this question as well. So this question comes from Francesco. Given climate funding's blind spots, funders shifted their priority to environment and left social and gender inequality behind. How do you ensure technology-related violence and environmental impacts on women are tacked together, not in silos? Raphael, do you have a response to this question?
I think the theory of environmental change should be based on social issues, and it's impossible to detach. Take, for example, what happens with environmental disasters, as happened right now this week in Brazil. Brazil had a tornado in which 7 people died, and a city of 13,000 people were completely destroyed. And it's a small city of workers, of vulnerable people. And in situations like that, when you have that kind of disaster, you have huge problems for women. If you put together like thousands of people in the same place, you could have things like rape, sexual assaults. Everything can happen when you are assisting the population. So it is completely connected. You cannot dissociate gender equality and prevention on violence to that. So at least I think that the Brazilian approach and the way also Lula spoke about that yesterday in the opening speech of the COP30, which I recommend to everybody to listen to very carefully, recognizes the role of societies and communities, especially vulnerable people, related to sustainability and environmental issues. So for us, it should be a building block. It's not about only natural resources and efficiency of energy and other kind of values. Of course, these are important values, but should be directed to the social dimension of the environment.
Thank you, Raphael. Catherine, or indeed Chris, if you have anything that you would like to add to this question, please just start speaking or put your hand up.
Sure. I mean, I think 100% agree with this, that for us, and Chris referenced this as well, we're the AI in Society Fund, and the society is the big part of that, right? The whole question is, what kind of societies do we want to build, and how, if at all, should AI be part of doing that? So for me, AI is a social justice issue, it's a climate justice issue, it's a racial justice issue, it's an economic justice issue, and it cuts across all these things. And unless we really start this from a lens of society rather than technology, otherwise we're falling into the paradigm that's been set for us. And really, we in philanthropy and in civil society should be saying, no, we want to imagine the kind of world that we want to live in. And then we'll talk about what technology does in it. So I think it's really important that we flip that dynamic.
Thank you, Catherine. Chris, unless you have anything to share on this question, I think we'll choose one more and then we will wrap up. So if you have any thoughts to share, otherwise I will move on.
Let's do one more question.
Great. Okay, so this question comes from Andrew Lyons. There's an example of the clash with regulation and big tech on AI. The EU AI Act has faced opposition from Silicon Valley and the White House. It would be interesting to know what the panelists think are the best routes forward for civil society that can engage in the middle and both build and protect. Chris, would you like to kick us off? And then I'll come round to Raphael and Catherine.
Sure. Catherine may have more insight into the EU dynamics in particular, but for broader civil society strategies on policy and regulation, I'd harken back to some of the comments I made in the opening around shared agency and how do we build a big politically powerful coalition on some of these issues that starts from the expertise deeply embedded in the responsible tech, responsible AI, digital rights ecosystems, but brings in constituencies with real bases, worker groups, parents groups, youth groups, faith groups in faith communities, etc. And the challenge we always talk about in philanthropy and civil society, how do we come together across silos so that we're more powerful together. And so I think that's the theme we've talked about today of partnerships, both funder partnerships on the philanthropic side, but civil society partnerships and networks on the ecosystem side are key to this. And then again, finding those policy issues where you can have broad coalitional support and have some fractures in the tech community where it's not monolithic opposition. And so we've seen this of different tech hyperscalers coming down on policy debates, with some coming on side and others in opposition. And I think wherever in politics you can have a fracture, and then broaden the coalition to include some with industry that are on side, that's hugely promising as well.
Thank you, Chris. Raphael and then Catherine. And after this question, I will be asking you to share your final remarks or thoughts on today's webinar as we prepare to wrap up. So pre-warning on that. But Raphael, would you like to jump in and share a response to this question first?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew, for the question. I think the clash is real and really aggressive. And what has been published by Political and other news outlets today about the way European Commission is stepping back and accepting the recommendations from the Draghi report and others that will probably reopen the GDPR norms. It's really concerning because that also has global effects. For instance, the Brazilian data protection law, which is quite advanced, also relies on the political legitimacy of GDPR in a way. So once you fractures and you make more flexible GDPR, that will certainly open the gates for flexible reforms in Brazil in the years to come. And also Trump has been completely aggressive in the negotiations and attacking, he has attacked the Brazilian Data Protection Authority, the data protection law, the PIC system, the Supreme Court, everything. But I think Lula has managed to not weaken himself and to position the country strongly. I also think it's really important for civil society actors and funders to try to construct resistance in a way that those negotiations can take place in a more transparent way. I think that the problem of those negotiations is that they occur in very opaque methods, and it's quite impossible for civil society to participate once it is only about trade. So I'm really concerned about, abandoning the fundamental rights strategy and method, and the conversation turns into trade negotiations.
Thank you, Raphael. Catherine, and then I'll be asking you to share just one sentence on your final thoughts from today.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it's, as we've just heard, it's an incredibly difficult context to operate in, and I think European civil society under the previous European Commission was incredibly successful in pushing positions that secured fundamental rights in legislation. And, perhaps we were complacent and thought, great, next job is like, we just implement it and enforce it, and it'll be great. And I think we've all felt, quite honestly, a bit blindsided to suddenly be in a position where legislation that people painstakingly crafted is now, you're in a position where it's like, we'll trade this law for Ukraine's security. And it's sort of blown into that kind of geopolitical context. I think, as we've heard from the others, the key to this really is around building alliances. So, certainly from a European perspective, European small and actually large businesses are suffering as much from the concentration of power of big tech as anyone else. And I think we have an opportunity here to strengthen a strong alliance across a spread of communities, both from the business community and from civil society, the unions, as Chris mentions, and realize that actually we all share a common cause. I think the other thing that's very apparent in Europe is the way that shoring up this legislation is about shoring up Europe's democracy. So Europe cannot end up in a position where it cannot enforce its own rules that it has determined. and the ability not just of the EU institutions, but of nation states to create laws and to see them enforced and not have that dictated by a foreign power is really key to this debate. So again, this is where if you work in coalition with people who work on rule of law, on democracy, on transparency, on corporate accountability, all of these things are fundamentally the same common cause that we can make progress on together.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. And would you like to just share one final remark on today's webinar as your closing sentence? Keep it short because we're already running over time, but I'm interested to know.
Just close by saying that AI and sustainability should involve access to information and workers' dignity. So we should have a larger conception of sustainability to do our work.
Thank you, Raphael. Chris?
Thank you, Elaine, and my fellow panelists for a great conversation. Thanks to the thoughtful questions from the audience. I'd say if you're already funding and working in this space, reach out in partnership has been the theme of the call. And if you're not but interested, that there are on-ramps to get involved through the various donor pooled facilities, philanthropies that are focused on this 100%. So I think there are on-ramps, and as Catherine said earlier, many opportunities for funding in this space.
Thank you. And Catherine?
Yeah, like I said, I'm an optimist, and actually this conversation has made me more optimistic to hear colleagues from different geographies who come to the same analysis and who really want to work together on this. I think, you know, this is going to be the key. We have to unite and make ourselves into a bigger beast and recognize that actually we are more than the people who have currently grabbed power, and that we have the potential to grab it back and to turn this tide. So yeah, I'm going into the evening feeling very optimistic and happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm feeling very optimistic as well. And I would like to thank all of you today for your incredibly insightful and eloquent answers. It's been a really fascinating discussion, and I hope all our attendees have enjoyed it. So it's been wonderful. A final reminder to all of our audience members, we're offering a 20% discount code to all event attendees today if you'd like to subscribe to Alliance Magazine and hear more from people like our wonderful panelists today. We publish an incredible amounts of opinion and analysis on global philanthropy, on climate and tech, and a bunch of other really interesting subjects. So the link is in the chat now if you would like to take advantage of that. Thank you to everyone. I hope you had a good session with us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day, no matter where you are in the world. Thank you again. Good evening.